Hey everyone, Kunik here, back with another D&D horror story for you today. In today's story, we have a player that taught the DM how to DM, and this new DM decided to go on a bit of a power trip. I won't say any more, so with that all said, let's roll for initiative and begin the story. This is going to be a long one, so strap yourselves in. Also, potential spoilers for anyone running Rime of the Frost Maiden. Story starts when the first wave of COVID first hit the United States. I live on the East Coast, and I normally DM my homebrew campaign with 5 close friends of mine, 3 of which have kids, the eldest of them being only 4 years of age. So obviously when COVID got here, and me also working at a hospital, my friends and I made the call to pause the campaign till things got better. For the following year, I've been writing session after session, just itching to play again. That's when one of my coworkers, Harry, whom I share an office with, said he's always wanted to get into playing D&D, and was wondering if he got a small group together if I'd be willing to teach them. I agreed, since we were working together every day in an already exposed environment. I didn't have an issue meeting up over the weekends, and if the group he put together also didn't mind. This was heavily discussed before anything was confirmed officially. Our group consisted of, using aliases, my coworker Harry, his 2 daughters Hope and Kelly, another coworker Jesse, the problem player / DM, who dates Kelly, and they both live in the same house with Harry, and lastly, Mark, who is married to Harry's other daughter, Hope. I first ran them through Dragon of Icespire Peak. Everyone loved it. Mark, Harry, and Kelly in particular were all great first-time roleplayers who took their characters very seriously. Hope was a slow learner, but also had a ton of fun. Then Jesse, who at every session would constantly make fun of Harry's character name, which was Deuce. But he'd call him Douche, which nobody ever laughed at, yet it became a norm where we all ignored it. Jesse played an Oath of Devotion paladin, but Jesse never fought frontline. He'd hide in the back in combat throwing javelins, never going out of his way to help the other players, and would only ever use his healing on himself. Fortunately, Mark was a life cleric and was amazing at playing one, so no party deaths thanks to him. Fast forward to the end of this campaign. Everyone loved it, and asked if I would run my homebrew campaign with them. I agreed, however I told them I wanted to go back and rewrite the start of my campaign, levels 1 through 5, and improve it since I wrote those sessions as a new learning DM, and they weren't nearly up to par with what I write now. So I told them I would need some time to do that between work and school. Mark also said he would love to be a DM, but would want to also world build and do his own story. He and I exchanged numbers, and I'd give him tips and resources. That left the only other candidate, Jesse, who said a few times during the campaign he wants to DM next. At that moment, my overall impression of how selfish he was as a player. I only imagined him sitting behind the DM screen would eventually be much worse. Boy was I right. He chose to run Rime of the Frost Maiden. Surprisingly, our first 5 sessions went very smoothly, although during some of those he showed signs of frustration when we would find ways out of deadly situations. Below is our sessions and our party. 1. Bremen, Lake Monster and Cold-Hearted Killer. 2. Kaer Koneg, the Unseen. 3. Lonely Wood, the White Moose. 4. Tourmaline, a Beautiful Mine. 5. Good Mead, the Mead Must Flow. 6. Dugan's Hole, Hold Up, Horror Story Part 1. 7. Targos, Mountain Climb, Horror Story Part 2. Party, myself, Half-Orc Cleric, Harry, Human Ranger, Kelly, Wood Elf Monk, Mark, Human Bard, Hope, Dwarf Barbarian. Thank you for sticking with me so far. I'm getting to the juicy parts now. Leading up to Session 6, Jesse can't stop saying to Harry and Kelly how he wants to kill 2 players. When they ask why, he said because it would be fun. So, Session 6, he tells us we are going to run Dugan's Hole, and we don't have a choice since that's what he prepared for the week. So, obviously, we waited all week to play, so we didn't argue about it, and we went along with the quest. We managed to avoid combat with the wolves, and they lead right to the Frost Giant Ice Lodge, where we encountered the mammoth, who at the time was sleeping. Kelly, who was a shadow monk, cast Pass Without Trace, and we all managed to have successful rolls, even myself with disadvantage. This seemed to annoy Jesse, so he said one of the wolves failed their roll and the mammoth is now awake and sees everyone. We roll initiative, and thankfully, Mark, our bard, rolls higher than the mammoth and was able to successfully calm the mammoth down. Once again, Jesse, visibly annoyed, groans and says, "Why do you always try to avoid a fight?" We all answer pretty much together that we don't want to die fighting something we know will clearly kill us. He then proceeds to have one of the wolves bite the mammoth from behind, and then has both wolves bolt out of the room. Jesse then tells us the mammoth is now pissed that he was harmed, and we must continue combat. My character, with 35 plus 8 temp HP, managed to get downed in one gore attack by this thing. When the rotation got back to Mark, he was able to successfully persuade the mammoth that it was, in fact, the wolves that were the problem, and not us. Jesse is now completely annoyed that we found a way out of his plan to kill two of us. He tells us to finish up whatever else we wanted to do, which we later killed both wolves and rescued the children safely. Session 7 began the same way as the prior week, where we were told we will be running the Targos quest once again, and with no other choice, we agreed because, duck it, the 5 of us are in this together. Here's a map of the layout of our situation as I continue to describe this crap show of a session. As we approach the cave, Harry, our ranger, decided to stealth in first and check out the situation. The rest of us waited in Area 1 by the entrance. He chose to go over the ice since he had boots of the Winterlands, and he made his way all the way over to the ledge. This seemed to annoy Jesse once again. Harry, not having dark vision, I casted light on his short sword before we entered prior, and he used that to see down into the room where Jesse replied, "You can't see anything! It's too far down! You'll have to turn back or go down the ledge yourself." We tried to remind Jesse that the light cantrip sheds bright light in a 20-foot radius and dim light for an additional 20 feet. His response, "I already said it's too ducking far." Harry then says, "Fine, I'll throw my short sword into the room and see what's down there instead." Once he tossed the sword into the room, Jesse loses it. "Fine! You want to be stupid? Your sword hits a baby yeti, and the mother is pissed off and roars loudly. It's an initiative." Next thing we know, the father yeti appears at the entrance of the cave just behind me. I was first in combat and planted myself directly in front of him and casted Spiritual Weapon behind him. Father Yeti goes right after me in combat and tries targeting Mark, our bard. I was only trying to make sense of the combat rules when the Yeti tried to move through me to get to Mark. I said to Jesse that if I'm correct, you cannot move through enemies. He responded with, "Fine, you want to die?" and proceeds to paralyze my character and immediately crit me twice in a row, resulting in me getting knocked unconscious. Once I'm on the floor, he looks right at me. "Are you happy?" Mark looks right at me and says, "I guess you pissed him off." I said I don't really care if I pissed him off. I was just trying to make sure we were playing this correctly. If it wasn't me, it was going to be you. When it gets to Harry's turn, he decides to shoot at the Mother Yeti. Jesse freaks out and says both of those Yetis aren't in combat, and he didn't roll initiative for them. All of us confused at the logic behind what he said. Harry replies, "My character doesn't know that. You said the mom is pissed off and roars loudly. I assume the rest of the party hears it, so my character is going to shoot her." Jesse freaks out once more. "Fine! You all want to ducking die today? You will! Jesse looks over at Mark and says, "Looks like you'll be DMing sooner than you think." Everyone at the table is asking why the hell is he so upset. His response was, "Because Harry wants to shoot helpless creatures." I said, "Dude, these are 2 full-grown yetis, not mountain goats." I continue with, "Last week, you're mad that we didn't want to fight something. Now you're upset that we're just assuming that an angry mama yeti is coming to kill us." Harry says, "Fine, I guess I'll just go back to the entrance." I managed to get back up due to my relentless endurance, knowing full well, right after my turn, I would get battered again by the yeti. I instead decided to take a dodge action instead of healing a few hit points. Jesse rolls and says, "Natural 20. I said, "Really? You rolled 2 natural 20s with disadvantage." He said, "I'm not going to roll 2 dice because I'm getting confused back here with all the numbers." I said, "You know what, Jesse? Fine, just kill off my character. I'm not going to sit here and argue any further with you." At this point, everyone around the table is silent, aside for awkwardly describing what they're doing on their turns. The rest of combat, Jesse would just skip over the Yeti's turn saying, "The Yeti does nothing," essentially just giving up on the combat altogether. I managed to get rescued, and we all just dashed out of combat since Jesse was no longer showing any interest in DMing the session. Once we were clear of the cave, Jesse said, "We completed the mission, and we were now level 5. He immediately walks out of the room and doesn't say anything else to anyone. Kelly rolls her HP, and then says, "Sorry guys," and then goes to find Jesse. And poor Mark, Session 7 was supposed to be the big reveal for his character, who we all thought was a human with amnesia. Mark planned with Jesse the week prior to get this big cinematic reveal, where Mark would describe to us all that he was in fact a fallen Aasimar. But it was ruined by Jesse's crappy attitude towards the group. So, as I finish up writing this, I still don't know what is even in store for our campaign going forward. I guess I won't find out until work tomorrow. I never thought I'd be sharing my own horror story on this sub, but I hope it wasn't too long for you all to read. Writing this helped me with some of the frustration I've been feeling from last night's session. Thank you. End post. You know, every story that I read, and we have a player that's just being obnoxious like this, I try to one-up myself and create an even more obnoxious voice for every story. I don't think I'm topping this one. It kind of reminds me of a gnome from like World of Warcraft or something like that. But yeah, I don't think I'm topping it. As for the story itself, I really think Jesse would have been a perfect fit for D&D First Edition. For those that don't know, in D&D First Edition, the DM was actively out to kill the players. And it said so right in the rulebook. So it was literally a case of DM versus players. Now, thankfully, that's not the case anymore, so we can have a bit more of a friendly relationship with the Dungeon Master, but that's how it used to be. So I think if he really likes playing this game, maybe he should go and try to find a D&D First Edition campaign to join. I'm sure they exist. Online only, I would assume, but I'm sure they exist. But as for a 5th edition game, or any modern edition for that matter, his actions are very clearly inappropriate. He really needed to read the room and understand that, hey, this other player doesn't want to have his character's name made fun of every session. Players don't want to die, like that's not fun for them. It could be great for a storytelling device, but just killing them for the sake of killing them doesn't really accomplish anything other than maybe DM self-gratification. Yeah, basically everything he did was wrong here. So my advice to anyone listening, don't do what Jesse did. Anyhow, if you like the story, the source of it is in the description below. And if you like the videos and you want to see more videos just like these, be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell notification icon to be notified of my future videos. And as about 80% of you watching are not subscribed, it would be doing me a huge favor for you to do so in order to help keep the channel growing. Anyhow, while you wait for my future videos, here are a few related videos that you can watch from my channel in the meantime.